Welcome to the Illinois State Board of Elections Division of Campaign Disclosure tutorial on election cycles and contribution limits. In this lesson, we will cover the election cycles for the various political committee designations, along with the maximum amounts that can be received from any source before contribution limits are met. Election cycles. Simply stated, an election cycle is the time frame in which a committee fundraises. The election cycle of a committee will vary both by the selected designation of the committee and, if a candidate committee, what office is being sought. Let's begin with the election cycles for candidate political committees, in which the candidate is seeking an office elected in the general election. Candidate committees established to support or oppose a candidate seeking an office elected at the general election will have two election cycles, the general primary and the general election cycles. The general primary cycle will begin January 1st following the last general election and will continue until ending on the date of the next general primary in which a candidate seeks nomination for that office. The general election cycle will pick up right after the primary cycle and as such will begin the day after the general primary. The general election cycle will continue until ending on December 31st, following the general election for that office. Next, for candidate committees established to support candidates for offices elected in the consolidated election, there are still two cycles, the consolidated primary and consolidated election cycle. The consolidated primary cycle will begin July 1st, following the last consolidated election, and will continue until ending on the day of the next consolidated primary in which the candidate seeks nomination. The consolidated election cycle will immediately follow, starting the day after the consolidated primary and continuing until ending on June 30th following the consolidated election. Moving on, the election cycles for candidates for the General Assembly are similar to candidates elected in the general election with one small difference. The election cycle for a General Assembly candidate resets at the next legislative election, regardless of whether the candidate's term is up. As such, the general primary cycle begins January 1st following the general election and continues until the date of the next general primary. Following immediately after, the general election cycle begins the day after the general primary and continues until ending on December 31st following the general election. Similarly, the election cycles for candidates for judicial retention mostly follow the election cycles for candidates elected in the general election. The only difference is the general primary cycle begins January 1st, following the general election in which the candidate was elected, and ends on the day the candidate files the declaration or intent to seek retention. Immediately following, the general election cycle for judicial retention candidates begins the day after the candidate files declaration or intent to seek retention, and ends on December 31st following the general election for retention. Special note, candidates that hold or seek more than one office elected in different election cycles must declare one cycle to be used for campaign disclosure purposes. This declaration is indicated on the D1 form. As you can see, election cycles for candidate committees are more complex as they are dependent upon the office being sought. Luckily, the election cycles or other committee designations are much simpler. The election cycles for political party committees, political action committees, ballot initiative committees, and independent expenditure committees follow the calendar year from January 1st to December 31st, resetting each calendar year. Now that we know the time frames of committee election cycles, let's look at contribution limits. Contribution limits are adjusted in odd years based on the rate of inflation. The following limits are effective as of January 1st, 2023. Starting with candidate political committees, a candidate committee can receive $6,900 from an individual, $13,700 from a business or organization general fund, and $68,500 from another candidate or political action committee. Additionally, there is no limit on contributions to a candidate committee from a political party committee, except for election cycles in which a candidate seeks nomination at a primary election. The amount a candidate committee can receive from a political party committee depends on the office being sought. During the primary cycle, candidates for statewide office can receive up to $274,200 from a party committee. Candidates for the Illinois Senate, Supreme, or Appellate Court in Cook County or countywide office in Cook County can receive $171,500 from a political party committee. Candidates for Illinois House, Supreme, or Appellate Court outside Cook County, countywide offices outside Cook County, and local candidates within Cook County can receive up to $102,900. And finally, all other candidates can receive $68,500 from a party committee during the primary cycle. Once the election cycle resets, the committee is allowed to receive the maximum contributions from each source again, and if in the general or consolidated election cycle, there is again no limit from a political party committee. There are two additional limits that only apply to candidates seeking nomination to Supreme Court, Appellate Court, or Circuit Court. Candidates seeking nomination for these positions may not accept contributions from out-of-state contributors or from any entity that does not disclose the identities of those who make contributions to that entity. There is an exception for labor organizations and similar groups or their political action committees acting as a conduit to facilitate the delivery of contributions made through dues or levies. Those contributions do not have to be itemized, except for single contributors who give more than $1,000 in a quarterly reporting period. The contribution limits for the remaining committee designations are similar. Political action committees can receive $13,700 from an individual, $27,400 from a business or organization general fund, and $68,500 from another political action or candidate committee. The contribution limits reset each calendar year. To continue, political party committees can receive $13,700 from an individual, $27,400 from a business or organization general fund, and $68,500 from political action committees. There are no limits from other political party committees, candidate committees, and the party committee's federal counterparts, but there is no transfer of funds permitted between legislative caucus committees. Again, the contribution limits reset each calendar year. Finally, ballot initiative and independent expenditure committees do not have any contribution limits. These two designations have no contribution limits because there are restrictions on the kind of political activity in which each committee designation can participate. Ballot initiative committees cannot give any direct contributions to other committees and must use their funds exclusively to support or oppose a question of public policy on the ballot. Likewise, independent expenditure committees cannot give direct contributions to any other committees, but rather must use their funds for independent expenditures in support of or in opposition to candidates or questions of public policy. Additionally, independent expenditures made by the independent expenditure committees cannot be made in any consultation or coordination with any other committee or candidate. To review, we have now covered the different election cycles and contribution limits for each committee designation, noting election cycles vary depending on the committee designation and, if a candidate committee, the office being sought. For more information, see our additional tutorials and publications or contact campaign disclosure staff in either the Springfield or Chicago offices. Thank you.